What's up, Algebra 1 students? This is lesson 46. Our objective is how do you simplify roots? And those are not like roots of a tree. Those are like square roots. Just for clarification there in case you were wondering. So let's just remember that if you take the square root of 5 squared, that ends up with 5 because those are opposite operations, kind of like multiplying by 2 and dividing by 2. The square root of 81, well 81 is 9 squared, so the square root of 81 would just come out to be 9. So the square root of x squared is x. Same thing holds true for cube roots, like the cube root of 23 cubed just comes out to be 23. The cube root of 8 is the same thing as a cube root of 2 cubed, which comes out to be 2. And then the cube root of 125 is the same thing as the cube root of 5 cubed, which is 5. So that's just kind of stuff you've seen before. You know how to do that. Something new for today is fractional exponents. So if you have the nth root, so over here that n is 2, and over here that n is 3, that's equal to x to the 1 over n. So it's a fraction, an exponent. So like the square root of x is the same thing as x to the 1/2. Those mean the same thing. Just two different notations. This we call exponential notation, this we call radical notation. The cube root of y is the same thing as y to the 1/3. And the 47th root of q is equal to q to the 1 over 47. So let's see if we can put some of this to practice and learn a little bit as we go along. This is your lesson practice, and our instructions are just to simply simplify each expression. So, looking over here at A, we're trying to figure out what's the square root. So I'm trying to think what times what gives me 196. Now, if you know your multiplications table is higher than 12, you know that 14 times 14 gives you 196. So this is equal to 14 squared, which is, so this whole thing is going to be 14. If you didn't know that, you would have to try to factor this. You end up with something like this. So you could say this whole thing is the same thing as square root of 2 squared, because notice I have 1, 2 of them, times 7 squared, because again I have 2 of them. So it's going to be 2 times 7, which is equal to 14. So you get the same answer either way, just a little bit longer. Depends on how quickly you recognize it. All right, B is the square root of the negative square root of 64. Well, 64 is 8 times 8. So this thing is going to be negative square root of 8 squared. So it's going to be negative 8. Okay. Part C, the square root of 1, so I'm thinking what times itself gives me 1. Well, 1 times 1 gives you 1, so this whole thing just going to let it be 1. And then D, notice it says the square root of negative 64. So I'm trying to think what times itself is going to give you negative 64. The answer is going to be inside the parentheses. And that same thing goes inside in both. The problem is that I don't have any number I can plug in there that whenever I multiply it by itself gives me that negative sign. See that? Because if I did 8 times 8, I'd end up with a positive 64. If I did negative 8 times negative 8, I'd also end up with a positive 64. So on this one, I would have no real solutions. And later we can talk about, complex numbers, and we can end up with a solution for that. But right now we're just going to stick with what we call, quote, real numbers, which is a category of numbers. So we'll just say no real solutions for that one. And that will actually hold true for any time that I have an even root. So this number right here is an even number, and the inside is negative. I'll end up with something that has no real solutions. So I think we'll see this one more time at least. All right, let's go to E. It's the square root of 81 over 144. Well, we can remember that we can do this. This is the square root of 81 over the square root of 144. Well, square root of 81 is 9, and the square root of 144 is 12. We reduce both those by 3, so it's going to be 3/4, 3/4. And this next one says the cube root of 1728. So unless you know what times itself 3 times gives you that, I'm going to try a factoring method. So I'm just going to try to come up with things that multiply together to give me that one. Okay, whoa, that took a little while. It was really fast for you, I know. But so I just took this, I realized it was even, so I divided it by 2. So I got 2, 864, and then divide that by 2. 2 and 432, divided by 2. 2 and 216, divide that by 2. 2 and 108, divided by 2. 2 and 54, divided by 2. 2 and 27, now it was odd, so I couldn't divide 2, but 3 went into it. 3 and 9, and 3 and 3. So now I'm looking for sets of 3. So notice I got 1, 2, 3 of those. 1, 2, 3 2's there. 1, 2, 3 2's there. So I can rewrite this now as the cube root of 2 cubed times 2 cubed, right? Because that's one set, times 3 cubed. There's another set. So the cube root of 2 cubed is just 2, so it's going to be 2 times 2 times 3. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. So the answer is going to come out to be 12. All right. Now, this next one, when I initially look at it, I want to say, oh, this is no real solutions, right? Because I see a negative inside. But I remember that this is a cube root, so I mean something times itself 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And now if all 3 of these were negative numbers, right, these two together would come out to be a positive, but then if I multiply it by a negative, then it would come out to be negative again. So 3, 4, 3. So this will work out. I just got to figure out what number times itself 3 times will give me that. So I'm going to have to kind of use that same factor method again because I don't just recognize that right offhand. It's kind of a big number. So I'm just going to go through and see if I can find some factors by dividing some numbers. Alright, so I checked 7 just by chance and it came out to work. So notice there's 3 7s there. 1, 2, 3 of them. So then this is the same thing as negative 7 cubed. So negative 7 times negative 7 will give you that positive 49 times negative 7. So this is going to come out to be negative 7. Alright, and then this is the 4th root of 160,000. So let's do the same thing again, find some factors that will work. I just did some maybe simpler ones if you recognize them. I did 16 times 10,000. That gives me that one. And then I broke up the 16. I noticed that it gave me 1, 2, 3, 4 2's. And when I was working with that 10,000, it ends up with it gives me 1, 2, 3, 4 10's. So I can write this as the 4th root of 2 to the 4th times 10 to the 4th, which means it's going to be 2 times 10, which is going to give me 20 is my answer. Alright, just a few more here. I says the 4th root of a negative number, which means it's going to have 4 things times itself will give me a negative number, which I cannot do, which I mentioned earlier, right? This is even and that's negative, so this is no real solutions. This one means what times itself 3 times will give you 125, right? This is the cube root of 125. We talked about this earlier, actually. That's the same thing as 5 cubed. So my answer is going to be just simply 5. This one means the cube root of negative 8. Well, if it was the cube root of 8, it'd be 2. Since that number is odd, we can do that. It's going to come out to be negative 2. This means the fourth root of 81. I think it's 2. Let's just check that. That's going to be, not 2. 9 times 9 is going to be 3. 3 and 3. 3 and 3. So yes, it's going to be the fourth root of 3 to the fourth, so it's going to have to be 3. This one's going to be the fourth root of negative 6 to 5. And remember, I got an even number, negative number, so then no real solutions. Homework's on page 291, all 46, all 45s, and 8 more of your choice.